I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty.
It began in the darkest, most silent hours of the night. Inside the dimly lit sovereign's office, King Charles III sat entirely alone, surrounded by the crushing weight of history and the ghosts of monarchs past. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic, unforgiving ticking of a centuries-old grandfather clock. On the grand mahogany desk before him lay a single document illuminated by the warm glow of a reading lamp. It was bound in thick parchment and sealed with the red wax of the sovereign, bearing a title that had not been whispered in the halls of the monarchy for generations, the Consort Exclusion Act. With a trembling hand, the king picked up his fountain pen. For decades, he had fought the world, the press, and his own family to protect the woman he loved. He had sacrificed his public image, weathered unprecedented scandals, and demanded that the nation accept her. But on this night, the husband was forced to surrender to the king. The pen touched the paper. In a matter of seconds, Charles signed away half of his reign's history. With one stroke of ink, Queen Camilla was officially and ruthlessly struck from the royal line of succession, stripped of her future constitutional privileges, and permanently removed from the inner circle of monarchical power. Her title, once a hard-won prize of endurance, was instantly reduced to a hollow shell. This was, without a doubt, the most brutal and unprecedented decision of Charles's entire life. Before we go deeper into the devastating truth behind this midnight decree and the secret palace betrayal that forced the king's hand, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a single royal secret. The morning light brought with it a reality far colder than the night before. As the sun rose over London, the machinery of the palace began to move with ruthless efficiency. A senior equerry, his face pale and completely unreadable, walked down the grand carpeted corridors toward Queen Camilla's private apartments. He carried a sealed silver tray bearing a single envelope stamped with the king's personal crest. When Camilla opened the envelope, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Palace insiders report that the Queen Consort went entirely still. The delicate porcelain teacup in her hand rattled violently against its saucer before slipping from her grasp, shattering into jagged pieces on the hardwood floor. She read the words again and again, her eyes frantically searching the thick legal parchment for a loophole, a clause of negotiation, or a sliver of mercy. There was none. The royal decree was absolute. It outlined in cold, unforgiving legal jargon that she would immediately cease to exercise any autonomous authority over the royal household, that her future influence over the crown's transition was permanently revoked, and that her standing as the leading female figure of the monarchy had officially been terminated. It was not a warning. It was an execution of her royal future. Miles away, hidden within the quiet sanctuary of Adelaide Cottage, another set of envelopes was delivered to Prince William and Princess Catherine. But here there were no shattered teacups and no screams of outrage. When the future king and queen read the identical copy of the decree, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. William stood by the window, his jaw clenched tight, staring out at the frost-covered grounds. Catherine sat perfectly still at the table, her eyes carefully analyzing the document that had just handed her ultimate, uncontested power. There was no celebration in their home. There was no triumphant cheering. Instead, William simply reached out and placed a steady hand on his wife's shoulder. They exchanged a single solemn look of profound understanding. They knew the agonizing emotional toll this had taken on Charles. The king had finally made the ultimate sacrifice, breaking his own heart to protect his son, his daughter-in-law, and the eternal survival of the British crown. But what could have possibly driven King Charles to commit such a devastating act of betrayal against the woman he had spent his entire adult life defending? To understand the magnitude of this midnight decree, we must rewind exactly 72 hours to to a secret, heavily guarded meeting at Windsor Castle. It was a gathering that was never meant to be made public, a closed-door session of the Royal Financial Planning Committee. And it was here that Camilla made a fatal, irreversible miscalculation. For months, whispers of a growing shadow court had plagued the palace. Camilla, acutely aware of William and Catherine's skyrocketing global popularity, had grown increasingly paranoid about her own legacy. Fearing that she would be sidelined the moment Charles's reign neared its twilight, she began a quiet, aggressive campaign to consolidate power. During the Windsor meeting, Camilla attempted an unprecedented power grab. She secretly ordered her closest aides to draft a plan that would legally divert several high-profile, multi-million-pound charitable patronages away from the Princess of Wales and directly into the hands of her own loyalist courtiers. But her ambition did not stop at financial patronages. The true catalyst, the spark that ignited the destruction of her reign, was a piece of paper concerning an upcoming, highly publicized state banquet. In the royal family, a seating chart is never just about where one sits. It is the ultimate, undisputed physical manifestation of power hierarchy and bloodline. Camilla had covertly demanded that the master of the household alter the traditional seating protocol. She ordered that Prince William and Princess Catherine be physically pushed away from the central head table, effectively downgrading their visual prominence in front of the world's cameras, all to ensure that her own family members and loyal allies flanked the king. It was a brazen, undeniable attempt to assert absolute dominance over the true heirs to the throne. However, she underestimated the impenetrable loyalty that the institution held for the future king. A senior courtier, horrified by this blatant manipulation of constitutional hierarchy, quietly intercepted the altered seating chart and the drafted patronage documents. Under the cover of darkness, these explosive papers were bypassed around Camilla's staff and placed directly onto the desk of King Charles. When the king saw the documents, the illusion of his united family shattered. He realized in one agonizing moment that the woman he loved was actively orchestrating a silent war against the very foundation of his bloodline. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. The monarchy could not survive a divided court, and it certainly could not survive a queen consort who viewed the future king and queen as rivals to be neutralized. The fallout was explosive. The moment Camilla was informed of the decree striking her from the royal line, she did not retreat to her quarters in defeat. Fueled by a blinding cocktail of grief and rage, she bypassed all security protocols, storming through the palace corridors directly toward the sovereign's private study. Courtiers scrambled to get out of her way as she threw open the heavy oak doors, ordering the king's private secretaries out of the room with a voice that reportedly echoed down the halls. The doors slammed shut, leaving the king and his wife entirely alone. What followed was the most destructive and agonizing confrontation of their decades-long relationship. Camilla was trembling with fury. She screamed, her voice breaking under the weight of her betrayal, reminding Charles of the unimaginable sacrifices she had made. She recounted the years she had spent as the most hated woman in Britain, the endless public humiliation, the vicious tabloid headlines, and the silent suffering she endured just to stand by his side. She demanded to know how he could discard her so ruthlessly after she had given him her youth, her reputation, and her entire life. But the man standing before her was no longer the conflicted Prince of Wales who had once begged the world to accept his mistress. He was the King of the United Kingdom. Charles stood behind his desk, his posture rigid, his face an unreadable mask of sovereign duty. He did not yell, he did not argue. The terrifying calmness in his voice cut through her rage like a blade. Reaching into his desk, Charles pulled out the heavily altered state banquet seating chart and threw it onto the polished wood between them. "The throne," he said, his voice dropping to a chilling, authoritative whisper, "is not a reward for our love. It is a sacred trust. And I will not allow you to tear down my son's future to build your own." The words hung in the air, suffocating the room. Camilla stared at the document, the undeniable proof of her overreach staring back at her. The fight drained from her body, replaced by a cold, devastating realization. She had played a dangerous game of royal chess, and she had lost everything. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached up to the collar of her dress. She unclasped a massive, priceless diamond brooch, a historic symbol of her royal authority, and let it drop onto the desk. The heavy thud of the jewels hitting the wood sounded like a gavel striking a block. "You didn't just protect the crown," she whispered, her voice laced with a venomous, unbearable sorrow. "You chose the crown over me." The heavy thud of the diamond brooch hitting the polished mahogany desk echoed through the sovereign's study like the final toll of a morning bell. It was the sound of a rein fracturing a definitive and irreversible severing of a bond that had defied the world for decades. But in the labyrinthine corridors of Buckingham Palace, secrets of this magnitude are never buried for long. The walls of the royal household have eyes and the shadows have ears. Within exactly 12 hours of that devastating closed-door confrontation, the impenetrable fortress of the British monarchy sprang a catastrophic leak. It began with a clandestine phone call made from an untraceable encrypted device deep within the palace's servant quarters to a senior ruthless editor at one of Fleet Street's most notorious media conglomerates. The anonymous informant offered no lengthy explanations and no sympathetic context. They delivered only a single explosive phrase that would instantly alter the course of modern royal history. Striking Camilla. Before the sun had even begun to rise over the River Thames, the colossal printing presses of London were roaring to life, churning out millions of pages drenched in bold crimson ink. London awoke to a media earthquake of unprecedented proportions. Newsstands across the United Kingdom were plastered with staggering full-page front covers. The digital shockwaves were even faster and far more merciless. Within minutes of the morning publications hitting the streets, the internet absolutely exploded. Social media platforms morphed into a chaotic global battlefield of royal commentary, but the overwhelming tidal wave of public sentiment was singular and deafening. For millions of loyalists who had spent years championing Princess Catherine, and for the countless global citizens who still fiercely guarded the tragic, lingering legacy of the late Princess Diana, this was not just breaking news. It was the ultimate long-awaited karmic vindication. Across digital forums and global broadcasting networks, the narrative was instantly cemented. The woman who had once been dubbed the great infiltrator of the royal family had finally overplayed her hand. The public perceived it as a poetic, almost biblical retribution. Camilla's covert attempt to usurp the beloved Princess of Wales had backfired with catastrophic precision, and the global adoration for William and Catherine surged to stratospheric, untouchable new heights. The streets outside Buckingham Palace quickly swelled with throngs of citizens and legions of flashing cameras, creating a deafening cacophony of speculation and fervor that threatened to rattle the very windows of the royal residence. Inside the palace, this atmosphere was one of absolute suffocating panic. Deep within the underground communications bunker, sweat-drenched public relations officials and senior courtiers waged a desperate war to regain control of the narrative. Phones rang incessantly, glowing red across every desk as international broadcasters demanded immediate confirmation of the midnight decree. The palace PR machine, renowned for its stoic silence, knew that they could not simply ignore a leak of this magnitude. To say nothing would be to admit chaos. To deny it would be to invite investigative ruin. Instead, they orchestrated a masterpiece of royal doublespeak. At exactly noon, Buckingham Palace released a highly sterilized, carefully manicured official statement. The press release did not use the words exile, banishment, or stripped. Instead, it spoke in the clinical, emotionally detached language of constitutional bureaucracy. The statement announced a strategic restructuring of senior royal duties designed to ensure a modernized and seamless transition of responsibilities for the future of the monarchy. It politely noted that Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, would be stepping back from her forward-facing administrative roles to focus on private localized charitable endeavors. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard scheduling adjustment. To the royal correspondents, political analysts, and the British public, the translation was crystal clear. Camilla had been ruthlessly purged from the corridors of power. The implementation of the king's decree was as swift as it was unforgiving. There was no grand farewell, no dignified transition period, and no final wave from the iconic Buckingham Palace balcony. Under the heavy, weeping grey skies of a torrential London downpour, a convoy of black, unmarked Range Rovers slipped quietly out of the palace's rear gates. Sitting in the dimly lit back seat of the lead vehicle was Camilla, her face turned toward the tinted glass, watching the looming stone walls of the palace fade into the mist. She was being relocated to Ray Mill House, her secluded private country estate in Wiltshire. Her royal diary was completely wiped clean. Her access to the sovereign's daily dispatch boxes was immediately revoked. The elite team of advisors, secretaries, and ladies-in-waiting, who had once managed her global image, was abruptly disbanded and reassigned. She was allowed to keep the hollow prefix of her title for the sake of public dignity, but she was entirely stripped of the mechanism of queenship. She had been exiled to the countryside, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, utterly powerless to interfere with the trajectory of the crown ever again. As Camilla's convoy disappeared into the English countryside, a new dawn broke over the royal family. The heavy, suffocating tension that had plagued the palace for months simply evaporated. Prince William and Princess Catherine stepped out from the shadows of the generational power struggle and into the blinding, absolute light of their destiny. In their first public engagement following the decree, the Prince and Princess of Wales appeared at a grand state reception, looking more formidable, united and regal than ever before. The physical space around them seemed to expand. Courtiers bowed a little deeper. Dignitaries deferred to them with undeniable reverence. The message to the world was undeniable. The Waleses were no longer just waiting in the wings. They were the undisputed, untouchable epicenter of the British monarchy's future, heavily fortified and entirely protected by the sovereign's iron will. Yet as the nation celebrated this newly solidified era of royal stability, a profound and heavy silence descended upon the private quarters of King Charles III. The victory of the crown had come at the agonizing cost of the man who wore it. Standing alone in the vast echoing grandeur of his study, the king looked out over the sprawling gardens of Buckingham Palace, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. The physical absence of the woman he had fought so bitterly to crown was a palpable, suffocating weight in the room. He had secured his son's future. He had stabilized the institution. He had done what history demanded of him. But he had paid for it with the one thing he had sworn never to sacrifice. In the ancient, unforgiving House of Windsor, love might occasionally win a few fleeting battles. It might rewrite a scandal, survive a tragedy, or even force an abdication. But the crown, the silent, heavy, immortal machinery of the monarchy, always wins the war. King Charles III had just proven the most brutal, devastating truth of absolute power. To be a truly great monarch, to ensure that the bloodline survives the relentless march of time, you cannot simply defeat your enemies. Sometimes you must be willing to take the blade in your own hands, pierce your own heart and sacrifice the person you love the most, all to protect the eternal, unyielding survival of the crown.